Hello Tower Gaming players, this is Evan Jarvis, also known as Gripst, and welcome to part 9 of my multi-table tournament guide. This section will go over something that has been new to poker since the moneymaker boom in 2004, huge field multi-table tournaments. MTTs range in size from 100 to 500 players typically, but with the introduction of small buy-in tournaments, as well as satellites to major events, it is commonplace to see fields ranging from 2,000 all the way up to 20,000 players. While your arsenal of weapons and your goal of making the top 3 places remains the same, these massive field tournaments must be approached differently from a strategic perspective if you want to have good results. Before I say anything about this type of tournament, I want to make one thing clear. If you plan on being a long-term tournament player and hope to potentially make your living playing MTTs, these tournaments should not be your focus. Your odds of winning one of these tournaments are extremely low, and if you were to play a 7,000 person tournament every week for your entire life, there is a good chance you'd never win it. If you want to consistently go deep, make final tables, and get those top 3 finishes, you should focus on tournaments with no more than 1,000 players. Tower Gaming's freeze-outs and rebuys fit this category perfectly and should be what you focus on if you want to be a tournament grinder. That being said, if you want to take a shot at a huge payoff and are feeling extremely lucky one day, then it's worth taking a shot at this type of tournament. So if they're so hard to win and very difficult to consistently go deep in, due to the sheer amount of variance involved, why would you want to play big field tournaments? First off, these tournaments give you a shot at winning over 1,000 times your buy-in. The World Series of Poker main event, for example, which averages about 6,000 players per year, pays $9 million to first place for a $10,000 investment. This equates to a 90,000% return on investment if you are lucky enough to finish first place. These type of tournaments are the ones dreams are made of, where you can win life-changing money without risking a huge amount. Secondly, these tournaments attract all types of players. Due to the low risk of investment, an absolute ton of amateur and recreational players are drawn towards these tournaments. You'll still have a lot of pros in the field, but the donkey to regular ratio is very high, and you are unlikely to ever have more than 1 or 2 strong players at your tables in these events. These tournaments are extremely fun, and it's a huge rush to have a big stack in one of them. There's a lot of coin flipping, a lot of draw versus top pair situations that arise, which means a lot of gambling. If you enjoy the thrill of races and being all in, these tournaments should more than be able to satisfy your appetite. Lastly is, once again, the dream. Every poker player aspires to one day get a huge score, and these tournaments give you that chance. You must accept that they are much like playing the lottery, and the odds are not in your favor. But every step you get deeper, your edge increases, and the possibility of taking one of these down is there. And believe me, there is no better feeling than beating out a bajillion people and being the last man or woman standing. It's a real rush. Here are some examples of big field tournaments where if you're lucky enough to be the champion, you can have a serious return on investment. Tower Gaming rebuys are my personal favorite because the fields aren't ridiculous in size and you can still turn a 2-figure investment into a 4-figure payday. The Stars Sunday quarter million and the Full Tilt Double Deuce on Sunday have absurd field sizes and therefore are huge crapshoots. But that being said, the reward is gargantuan if you can pull off the feat of besting 10,000 to 25,000 players. The Sunday Million is a bit more on the expensive side at $200, but it has the same attributes as the smaller buy-in events. It's an absurd amount of players to get through, but if you win this one, your life will definitely change. Finally, we have the $1,000 events at the World Series of Poker. A ton of players play these, and there are a lot of pros in the mix, but for anyone with live experience, the edge is absolutely massive, and they are a must-play for anyone who can afford them or win a satellite in. So what exactly makes a big field tournament different from regular multi-table tournaments? The first point is obvious, it's the sheer amount of players. It may seem a very daunting task to try to beat out 20,000 players, but if you look back to our earlier lessons, you should remember that no matter what the field size of the tournament, it's still you against your 9 or 8 table mates. The beauty of these monster field tournaments is that most of your opponents are going to flat out suck, giving you a much better chance to accumulate chips. Since these tournaments have so many players, but they can't take 50 hours to play out, the blind structure is adjusted. In these tournaments, you don't start with many chips and the blinds go up very fast. This means there's a lot of pressure to be constantly playing, and you can't really sit back and wait for hands or the blinds will eat you alive fast. These tournaments also skip a lot of the blind levels that the smaller field tournaments have, which means the blinds grow at an exponential rate compared to normal tournaments. Next, we have my favorite thing about big field MTTs, the competition. The fields in these things are extremely soft. You'll have players who play every hand, players who never fold a draw, players who won't fold top pair no kicker no matter what the action is, and players who can't fold an overpair even if it's for 200 big blinds. For an experienced player, this means a ton of profitable opportunities will present themselves to chip up, which simply do not exist in tournaments where the field is shark infested. You'll have to learn how to combat the various types of crazies that you will run into in these events, but once you figure it out, you'll be laughing all the way to the bank. Even with the fast structure, these tournaments still take a very long time. Where a regular MTT might take 4 to 6 hours, for these events you are looking at 10 to 12 hours easily. If you're going to really try to win one of these, you must mentally prepare for a long session, and you would be smart to plan your meals and snacks ahead of time so that you have a steady supply of nutrients, which will allow your brain to function optimally. If you don't eat for half the tournament, then indulge in a big meal, I guarantee you won't last long, because the human brain can't function optimally when the body is being bogged down with heavy digestion. Due to the long nature of the tournament and the fact that players feel they have invested a lot in the tournament by the time the bubble rolls around, it creates for a special dynamic. Nobody wants to play a tournament for 6 hours only to come up short and bubble for a big fat payout of 0. This is one bubble you can take advantage of more than any other bubble you will encounter. Just don't be afraid to be that player who took his shot at a big stack and ended up failing to min cash for double the buy-in. Remember, when you entered this tournament, it was for the 500 or more times the buy-in prize, not the double or triple your buy-in prize for making it to the first pay level. Continuing on this point, a lot of players will be happy to outlast another 500 players and get one more buy-in added to their payout. In the case of a $10 tournament, an additional $10 prize. The amount of players you have to outlast for such a small increase in pay is simply not worth worrying about. Focus on the final table and giving yourself the best chance to get there. When you get deep in an event like this, you want to make the most of it, and trying to move up the payout structure is the exact opposite of making the most of your chance. And finally, what I have just been preaching for the last 2 points should be reiterated one more time. All the money is at the final table, and in big field tournaments that amount of money is huge. These payouts are the ones we play for, the ones we dream about, so never forget the final table is where you want to be, and survival is not important if it means decreasing your chances of making it to the final 9 or 10. Now that you know what makes a big field multi-table tournament, let's go over what adjustments you should make to your general tournament strategy to maximize your chances of hitting it big. More so than in any other tournament, in a big field tournament you want to try to acquire a big stack as quickly as possible. The blinds go up very fast, which means players who are playing patiently will be facing a lot of pressure. Your 40 big blinds shrink up to 10 big blinds in no time at all, and your flexibility drops off extremely quickly. The only way to avoid this pressure is to bully the players who are facing it. If you are able to acquire a big stack, you can pick up the pots that nobody else can, because they simply can't afford the risk of losing their stack. As the blinds get bigger, you will be picking up bigger pots and keeping ahead of the fast-moving structure. Remember, if you are able to steal the blinds twice per round, or make a re-steal once per round, you can make it to the final table if you don't run into any confrontation. Nobody wants to get knocked out of a tournament, and if you have a big stack and are playing it aggressively, you're basically letting everyone know that if they want to play a pot with you, they have to risk their entire tournament. By playing well, instilling fear, and bullying the correct spots, you might just be able to cruise your way deep without anyone standing up to you. To acquire a big stack and to stay ahead of the blinds, you must be willing to gamble. In these types of tournaments, you should be willing to coin flip more liberally. Normally, I advocate only flipping if it's for 1/3 of your chips or less. However, in these events, accumulating is so much more important than survival that you should be willing to flip even if it's for your entire stack. You should never pass up a spot where you're a 60-40 favorite or better in these events under any circumstances. You should be playing all flop draws and flop top pairs or better extremely aggressively as stacks get shallow. In these tournaments, you should always play your pot equity and do your best to maximize your fold equity. Basically, you have to take your aggression to a whole new level if you want to do well in a big field MTT. Being aggressive also means playing super aggressively pre-flop. Due to the fact that there are tons of weak players in these tournaments, it is unlikely you will often run into players who are willing to fight back or try to out-bully the bully. Steal the blinds mercilessly, hammer on every weak limper when you're in good position, and bet, bet, bet. Weak players love to call a bet on the flop with any pair, hoping to improve to something better on the turn. This means that you have to go beyond just regular continuation betting and firing a lot of turn and river barrels. Don't be afraid to bluff your stack off. If your opponent is very unlikely to have a better hand than one pair, it's very likely that he's going to fold to a big river bet. The later on in the hand you make your opponent fold, the bigger the pot you win. And by playing big pot poker, you give yourself the best chance to accumulate the stack you need to make the final table. And remember, your risk, regardless of how big your chip stack is always simply your initial buy-in. So it's relatively small compared to the reward you're shooting for. In these events, you have to treat your buy-in as gone once you register because your odds of succeeding are so low. Once you disassociate yourself with the money, you'll be more capable of playing the maniacal psycho style that is required to make it to the end. Continuing on with the concept of hammering on weak players, you will also be running into a lot of loose players who don't play well post-flop. Against these players, you want to call with more hands than you normally would, since you'll be able to take pots away post-flop. Weak players are great at letting you know what they hold based on their bet sizing and when they check. And as you gain experience, you will be able to identify when a loose player is A, giving up, allowing you to take the pot, B, doesn't have a hand strong enough to call a raise in multiple barrels, in which case you should start applying the pressure, and C, just isn't folding, in which case it's okay to let them win the pot. Use your position to gain information about your opponent's hands. Once you gain your information, act on it, whether it be with a well-sized steal bet or a cheap fold. The bubble is something I talked about on the previous slide, and I will briefly mention again. The first bubble in these tournaments is a great opportunity to chip up, since everyone will be sitting on their hands waiting to min cash. In these types of tournaments with extremely weak fields, there is nothing wrong with opening 80% or more hands on the bubble, because most players will be complete pushovers at this point. If, however, you find a player who is willing to give you a hard time, it's okay to tone down the aggression a little bit, or only open pots when this player has already folded, so you don't have to worry about him coming back at you. Weak players play especially poorly as the stakes start to get big, i.e. deep into the tournament. And if you have a big stack when the stakes start to go up, you will be able to capitalize on their poor play fully. The final table, bubble, is where tournaments are won in this type of event. The payouts at the final table are so big that when people make it to the final two tables, they just want to wait it out and get a piece of that final table money. This makes for the most lucrative opportunity in poker. Weak players playing scared money. The blinds at this point will be huge, and thus you can pick up a ton of chips at this point. And if your opponents have not shown aggression and suddenly start to play back at you, you can let them have the pot because they probably have a huge hand. and get right back to work on the next hand. You risk so little to pick up the blinds at this point, and your success rate will be so high that there is really no excuse for not going all out at this point. You want to enter the final table with a stack that has a reasonable chance to win you the tournament, and this is the time to build it. Once everyone makes the final table, they'll be a lot less fearful and therefore willing to gamble, so you have to make your move before that fear subsides. If the point hasn't come across yet in this presentation, let me say it one more time. These tournaments are a gamble fest. Only he who is willing to gamble and take chances can be the victor in this type of event. Solid play simply won't cut it. Keep your foot on the gas pedal, put the pressure on your opponents, take every gamble, and if luck is on your side, you just might find yourself with millions of chips when it's all said and done. This has been Evan Jarvis for Tower Gaming. See you at the top.